The moment my brother's name showed up on the deed transfer request, I didn't panic. I just sat very still at my kitchen table, stared at the document on my laptop screen, and thought, he actually did it. I'd suspected for months, maybe longer, if I'm being honest with myself, but suspecting something and seeing it in writing are two completely different things. My name is on the title to a small commercial property in Raleigh, North Carolina. My grandmother left it to me when she passed 3 years ago. It's a 2-unit building, a former print shop on the ground floor that I've been renting out, and a storage unit in the back I used for my freelance staging business. Nothing glamorous, but it was mine, free and clear, and it was the first real asset I'd ever had. My grandmother knew what she was doing when she left it to me. She knew I was the only one in the family who would protect it. My brother, I'll call him by what he is, not his name, had been circling that property since the day she died. He's 4 years older than me, 34, charming, in the way that only people who've practiced being charming can be. He has a way of framing everything as if he's doing you a favor. When he asked to use the ground floor unit for 6 months while he got his business off the ground, he presented it like a gift. I'll give you exposure. My clients will drive by and see your name on the building. I said no. He sulked for 3 weeks and then acted like the conversation never happened. When he asked to co-sign on a small business loan using the property as collateral, he framed it the same way. It's just paperwork. You won't owe anything. I just need your name for the application. I said no again. His wife, who I had mostly tolerated until that point, stopped returning my texts. That was 18 months ago. I should have known then that a no from me just meant he'd find another way. My grandmother had a long-time family attorney, an older man who'd handled her estate since before I was born. He was meticulous and kind and the kind of person who still mailed physical copies of everything. When he retired last spring, the estate file transferred to a younger associate at the same firm. I'd never met her. I never needed to. As far as I knew, everything was settled. Except it wasn't. What I eventually pieced together, and this took time and a lot of phone calls and one very uncomfortable Saturday going through a filing cabinet I'd been avoiding for 2 years, was that my brother had contacted the new associate directly. He'd introduced himself as the family's primary estate contact. He provided her with documents, signed documents. Documents with my name on them that I had absolutely never signed. The deed transfer request I found in my email that Tuesday morning was the result of that. It was framed as a routine update, a correction to a clerical error. My brother's name was listed as co-owner pending my confirmation. There was a link to digitally sign. I did not click the link. I closed the laptop, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the table for a long time. I work in interior staging. I move furniture for a living, essentially. I go into homes that are about to be listed and make them look like somewhere a person would want to start their life over. I am good at it. I am organized, and I have an eye for what people want to see versus what's actually there. My clients hire me because I make things look intentional when they aren't. That skill turned out to be useful in a way I never expected. Because the first thing I did, once I stopped being still, was start documenting everything. I didn't call my brother. I didn't call my parents. I called my own attorney. Not the estate firm, a different one, a real estate attorney a colleague had used the year before. I explained the situation in as much detail as I could. She told me not to touch anything, not to confirm anything, and to get her every piece of paper I had related to the property. Then I started pulling on the thread. The new associate at the estate firm was apologetic once I explained I was the actual owner and had not initiated any transfer request. She'd received what appeared to be a notarized letter from me, authorizing her to communicate with my brother on my behalf. She had no reason to doubt it. She'd sent him documents. He'd returned them signed. I asked her to hold everything and send me copies of all correspondence. The notarized letter was notarized by anyone I'd ever met. The signature looked close to mine, close enough that if you weren't looking for it, you might not notice. But I have a very specific way I sign my name. The R in my last name curves back on itself. The forgery didn't. I took photographs of everything. I dated them. I put them in a folder on my desktop that I backed up to 2 separate cloud drives. My attorney contacted the estate firm formally the following week. The transfer request was frozen. My brother was not informed of this. I want to be clear about that. I did not tell him. I did not tip him off. I just waited. He called me on a Thursday evening about 2 weeks later. Casual, like we talked all the time. Hey, just checking in. How are things? How's the staging business? I said things were fine. He said he'd been thinking about Grandma a lot lately. I said I had too. He mentioned the Raleigh property offhand like it was a minor topic. Said he'd been thinking it might make more sense to have both our names on it for estate planning purposes. Easier for the family down the line. I said I'd think about it. He said great, and that he loved me, and we hung up. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time after that. I want to tell you I felt angry in that moment, and I was, somewhere underneath. But mostly what I felt was tired in a very specific way, the kind of tired you feel when something you've been half expecting for years finally arrives and you realize the dread was its own kind of exhausting. I called my parents the next day, not to warn them, just to take the temperature of the room. My father answered. We talked for a few minutes about nothing. I asked if they'd spoken to my brother recently. He said yes, actually. My brother had been by for dinner the previous weekend. My father mentioned carefully that my brother had said something about the Raleigh property, that it might be good to get things organized, that Grandma would have wanted the family to be on the same page. I asked my father what he thought about that. There was a pause. He said he thought it made sense to keep things simple. I said, Dad, he forged my signature on a legal document. Another pause. I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding, he said. I have replayed that sentence many times since then. I didn't argue. I said okay and that I loved him, and I got off the phone. Then I called my attorney and told her I wanted to understand every legal option I had. Here is something I have learned about financial crimes within families. The legal system does not particularly care that the person who wronged you shares your last name. Forgery is forgery. Fraud is fraud. The fact that my brother smiled at my grandmother's funeral and helped carry her casket does not change what he did or what it means under the law. My attorney filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office. She also contacted the notary whose stamp had appeared on the fraudulent letter, a man whose license, it turned out, had been expired for 7 months. That's a separate violation. That detail mattered later. In the meantime, I kept going to work. I staged a 4-bedroom colonial in Carrie. I rearranged a living room in Durham. I moved a sectional sofa by myself in a house in Chapel Hill and cried a little in the driveway after, not because of the sofa, but because I was just very tired. My brother texted me twice during this period asking if I'd thought more about the property. I responded each time with something vague. Still thinking, been really busy. He didn't push hard. He was waiting. 6 weeks after I found the deed transfer request, I got a call from the investigator assigned to my case. She'd spoken to the notary. He admitted he'd stamped the letter without verifying identity, claimed my brother told him it was a family matter and everything was in order. He was cooperative. He was also terrified. My attorney told me we had enough to move forward. What happened next I have to explain carefully, because there's a part of it that people sometimes misunderstand. I did not set a trap to humiliate my brother. I am not someone who enjoys conflict. I grew up in a house where conflict happened around me, and I learned very early to make myself small and quiet, and to wait for things to calm down. What I did was simply allow the legal process to proceed on its own timeline, while not giving my brother any reason to suspect it was coming. There is a difference between a trap and a door you leave open. My brother had been planning a small event. He'd rented out the ground floor of my building, from the tenant who leased it, a graphic designer named Whitney, who I'd known since the property came to me. Whitney had no idea about any of this. She'd agreed to let my brother use the space for a Saturday afternoon gathering because he told her it was a family celebration, and he was the co-owner. She texted me the Friday before to confirm the time. I read that text 3 times. Then I called Whitney and very calmly explained that my brother was not a co-owner of the building, that no transfer had gone through and that she was the tenant of record and I was the sole owner. I told her she hadn't done anything wrong. I told her she didn't need to cancel anything. I just needed to be there. Whitney, to her credit, did not ask a single unnecessary question. She said, "Okay, see you Saturday." I want to describe what I was feeling when I drove to Raleigh that Saturday morning, but I'm not sure I have the right words for it. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't satisfaction. It was something quieter than that. A kind of stillness that comes when you've been waiting a long time for something and you're finally just moving toward it. The building is a narrow brick structure on a side street not far from the warehouse district, street parking in front, a small parking lot behind. The ground floor has big industrial windows that Whitney had put plants in, and there's a sign above the door with her studio name on it. My brother's car was already there when I arrived, his wife's too. There were a few other cars I didn't recognize. I parked on the street. I sat for a minute, then I got out. I want to tell you I walked in dramatically, that I said something cutting and well-timed. I didn't. I knocked on the door, and when my brother opened it, his face did something complicated. He smiled first, automatic, reflexive, and then something shifted in his eyes. "Hey," he said, "I didn't know you were coming." "I know," I said. The space was set up nicely. Round tables, some catering trays, a little bar cart in the corner, maybe 15 people, mostly people I didn't know. His wife was talking to a couple near the window. She saw me and went very still. I said hello to the room generally. I introduced myself as the building's owner. I said I was glad everyone could make it and that I hoped they'd have a lovely afternoon. My brother laughed, the kind of laugh that's actually an attempt to manage a situation. "She's joking," he said. "She's my sister." "I'm not joking," I said, "and I need to speak with you outside." We went to the parking lot behind the building. I will not put words in his mouth that aren't accurate. What he said, essentially, was that he didn't know what I was talking about, that the transfer had been filed, that everything was legal, that I was making a scene over nothing. I showed him the letter my attorney had sent, which I printed and brought in a folder. He read it. His expression didn't change exactly, but it flattened in a way that told me everything. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. I thought of my father saying the same words. "The investigator doesn't think so," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. "You called the police on your own family." "I filed a complaint with the Attorney General's office," I said. "The investigators made their own decisions." He said some other things after that. Some of them were about how I'd always been difficult, how I'd never wanted what was best for the family, how I thought I was better than everyone else. I let him say them. I had heard versions of them before, at different volumes, in different rooms, my whole life. When he stopped, I said, "You need to go back inside and tell your guests the event is over. Or I can call Whitney out here, and she can do it as the tenant of record. Either way, this space isn't yours to use." He went back inside. I stood in the parking lot and breathed. I heard the sound of the party ending, the shift in tone, the muffled questions, the door opening and closing as people left. His wife came out at some point and stood near their car. She didn't look at me. She just stood there with her arms crossed. My brother came out last. He didn't say anything. He got in the car. They drove away. Whitney came out after and stood next to me. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I think so." "I made a tray of the little cucumber sandwiches and nobody ate them," she said. "You want some?" I laughed. It surprised me. Real laughs usually do. We went back inside and sat at one of the round tables and ate cucumber sandwiches and didn't talk about my brother at all. We talked about her studio and a mural she was planning and a trip she wanted to take to Portugal. It was the best part of my entire week. The legal process after that moved slowly, the way legal processes do. My brother was formally interviewed by the investigator about 6 weeks later. His version of events involved a lot of "I was told and I understood it to be," and "I thought she had agreed." The notary, by then, had given a full statement. The associate at the estate firm had provided every email. The forged signature had been examined by a documents analyst. There was no version of this story in which he hadn't known exactly what he was doing. My parents called me during this period. My father was quiet and sad in the way he gets when something has already happened that he can't undo. My mother was upset, and some of her upset was directed at me, and I let it be. I said I understood she was hurting. I said I loved her. I said that what had happened was a crime and I hadn't started it. She said she knew that. It took her a while to say it, but she said it. My brother was charged with forgery and attempted fraud. He hired his own attorney. The case moved into the system and I stopped tracking every development the way I had been. My attorney kept me informed. I went back to work. I staged a townhouse in Morrisville that sold in 4 days. I found a pair of vintage lamps at an estate sale that were exactly right for a bedroom I'd been struggling with. I had coffee with a friend who asked how I was really doing, and I actually told her, and it felt strange and good at the same time. I still own the building, both units. My name, and only my name, is on the deed. Whitney renewed her lease for another 2 years. She sent me a card, an actual physical card, handwritten, that said she was glad I'd come that Saturday. I have it on my refrigerator. My grandmother bought that building in 1987 with money she saved working double shifts at a textile mill while raising 3 children. She never talked about it much. She just had it. She paid it off. She kept it. When she left it to me, she called me the week before she went into hospice, when she could still talk clearly. She said she wanted me to have it because she knew I'd keep it. She said, "You're like me, you hold on to things." I think about that a lot. I held on. I think about the moment my father said, "I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding," a lot more than I probably should. Not because it hurt me, though it did, but because of what it revealed. He wasn't lying. He genuinely needed to believe that. It was easier for him to absorb what my brother had done as an accident, a miscommunication, a paperwork mix-up, than to sit with the truth of it. And the truth was that his son had forged his daughter's name on a legal document and tried to take something that wasn't his. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice made by someone who assumed I wouldn't look too closely, or that if I did, I'd stay quiet the way I always had. I had stayed quiet for a long time. That part is true. I'd said no to the loan cosign and no to the shared lease, and then I'd let it drop. Every time. Because the alternative, the confrontation, the fallout, the way my mother's voice gets when she's trying to keep everyone together, felt like more than I could carry. So I said no and moved on and told myself that was enough. It wasn't enough. It just gave him more time to find another way. What I understand now is that silence when the wrong people are in the room doesn't keep the peace. It just makes you easier to work around. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because it's the thing I most needed to understand about myself, and I only understood it because of what happened with that building. The thing that actually protected me wasn't luck, and it wasn't some dramatic confrontation in a parking lot. It was a filing cabinet I'd kept organized. It was knowing the name of a real estate attorney before I needed one. It was the habit, one I developed slowly, almost without realizing it, of writing things down, saving things, dating things. My grandmother kept records the same way. I found 30 years of receipts in a shoebox in her closet when we were clearing out her house. At the time I thought it was a quirk, now I think it was wisdom. There's a version of this story where I never noticed the email, where I click the link without reading carefully, where I assume everything is fine, because assuming everything is fine is easier. That version ends very differently. My brother understood that. He was counting on it. He didn't count on the fact that I'd learned somewhere along the way to pay attention, to ask questions, to trust what the documents said over what people's faces told me they wanted me to believe. That's not special skill. It's not something you're born with. It's something you build, slowly, by caring about the things that are actually yours and refusing to let that care go slack, just because someone is family and it would be easier not to fight. Whitney renewed her lease. My name is still the only one on the deed. I still have the card she sent me on my refrigerator. I held on. That turned out to be enough.